Couple free things that we've got going. Yesterday we popped up a new blog and we're doing a Block Mania blog hop. It's a bunch of us designers in the industry. We all designed a free summer block. This was mine. It's called Buckets of Fun. You can go to the Whimsical Workshop website and click on the blog button to get to our blog, or you can go back in our posts on either Instagram or Facebook. I put all the links there. But our Buckets of Fun quilt, I turned it into a little pillow for this month. I did cut this on the Cricut, so if you happen to have a Cricut maker and you're interested, I did put the SVG file, which is a file for the Cricut makers, up. It's free along with the block pattern on our website under Extras, Free Patterns. And I did a video in YouTube about how I put this whole thing together, and that link is also in the blog and on the post. So go out there, check this out. I think there's more than 20 blocks. They are adorable. There's some really, really fun summer blocks. We all stayed in the peach and blue theme, so they all kind of go together. And it was just really, really fun. So next month we're going to do it again. We're going to do back to school, so pay attention or stay in touch for that one. So next is we had lots and lots of people post their blocks this week, which was awesome, and their samples. I see people are getting their fabrics, they're getting going, which is super exciting to see the progress. So we actually had a drawing this week, and Barb Craig won. She won a pack of magic pins. If you haven't seen me talk about these, they are silicone tipped pins that are super sharp. They're the best pins I've ever used. I actually got rid of all of my other pins in the studio and just have these, and these are on our website. If you're not Barb Craig and you didn't win, congrats, Barb. I will get your info and get that mailed out to you. All right, now on to the class part. Today's block, we are on week 4, and we are on block 2, which is kind of hard to believe, but block 1 was the center. The first week was intro, block 1 was week 2, and this outer border was week 3, which then we turned into a block if you're just doing sample blocks. And this week's block is this one. This is our block 2. And I'm going to talk about how we put this whole thing together. And so let me turn the camera down and we will get started on that. Just a second. So the first part of this block involves half square triangles again, which I'm not really going to recap that because we've done that 2 weeks in a row, but I do want to show you on this block, this is a 6-inch finished half square triangle, which is too big to use the ruler technique. So I want to show you how I mark things when they get this big. And so I happen to have a block here. So first, again, layer up my 2 pieces like we always do. And this time I take a regular ruler. This is the Creative Grids 8.5 by 18. It's one of my favorites because it's not super long and we can use it for things like this. But we use a ruler that has a 45-degree line marked on it. And I know they teach you to go from point to point, draw your line, so 1/4 inch on either side. Again, I'm not a big fan on that because you're just picking 2 points and you can't line up your edges very well. So what I do is I use the 1/4 inch line on it, and I align the 1/4 inch line point to point and the 45-degree line along the bottom, and draw my first line. This will make sense here in just a sec, I promise. Draw the first line, then this is my sewing line. Then I turn this over, I repeat, but this time, along with my 45-degree line and my 1/4 inch line, which I put on point to point, I can now use the 1/2 inch line on the line I just drew to make sure everything is kosher. And then I can just draw the second line, and you can see how even that is. So you're going to sew and sew, and then you will be able to cut them apart, and have your half square triangles. Okay, so that's the only thing I want to talk about, half square triangles. If you need more info on them, make sure you go back and watch week 2 and week 3 because we did cover that. The next step is once you have your half square triangles, you're going to need to do flip and sew on the corners, or sew and flip, or I'm not sure, there are all kinds of names. I was taught this flip and sew, but once you see it, you'll know. I'm sure you've done it for flying geese. So to do that, I also mark my flying geese very differently. Normally you would mark point to point and sew on the drawn line. Again, you're only picking point and point. You're not using any of the sides as your guide. So I use this ruler, or I use the my favorite Pac-Man ruler. You can just lay it on here. This is the Creative Grids folded corner clipper. I've found I keep grabbing this when I'm using little squares because it's smaller, it's less acrylic to handle than this guy. I do, if I go on a trip or I'm quilting and I only take one ruler, I take this one. But this is another backup ruler that's really nice to have. And we will be adding this to the website in the next week or two. I've already ordered them, we're just waiting for them. So if you need a little guy, it's great. And again, I'm going to align top of the square with the top of the ruler, side of the square with the side of the ruler, bottom of the square with the 2.5 inch line, and then draw my line. That is way more accurate than just going point to point. Now, when I go to sew this, I am still sewing point to point, and my 1/4 inch guide goes on this line. Now, you could, if you chose to, you could cut that afterwards. You could cut it before you put it on. I don't find that as accurate. I do find marking it, then aligning it with the piece I'm sewing as a square, because again, it's no bias, so nothing's stretching. And then I would sew point to point, 1/4 inch foot guide goes on there. And then I would trim them up, and I'm going to show you how I do that here in a second. You could accidentally put it on here. The easiest way to remember is the little triangle. This is little triangle, that's the big triangle. The little triangle always points out. So, out. This way, you wouldn't be able to use your 1/4 inch foot. You would then be just sewing point to point, and there's no point in marking it that way. So, little triangle out. So you mark all of these, you lay them on the squares, and then we're going to sew them in place. You're going to trim your excess and flip this up. And look how perfect that is. It is perfect because we used 3 points to mark that line versus just the 2 corners. You will be amazed and thrilled if you use this technique for flying geese, for square and a square, for these little flip and sews. But when I go to cut these, what I do is I take a line on my cutting mat and I align the sewn line with the line on the mat, and I will lay these all up. I will lay them all the way down. Then I take a ruler and I lay it on the 1/4 inch line on my sewn line, and I just cut. That way I can cut 10, 12, 15 of these at one time, and it goes so much faster. Now, if you're not sure, if you flip this up and there's any background fabric showing, you could just with scissors cut out the one layer and leave the background. I don't tend to do that because I don't like the bulk. So then we're ready to press these. Get my handy pressing mat out for you. So we're ready to press. This is now a bias edge. You don't want to stretch it. So take the iron, take the edge of the iron, and I just press the seam. I don't go out to the edge until everything is in a block, and then I'll press it. You can see it lays flat. It will pop up a little, but this is what's important. Don't worry about that. Okay, same thing for the half square triangle. You would just press this out. And this case, trying to remember how it goes here, we pressed these towards the dark. So the half square triangles towards the dark. The little triangle I always tend to press out, whether it's light or dark, it doesn't matter. It just lays flatter that way versus pressing it this way. This can distort it a little bit. So little triangles out. All right, so that is the first 2 units. You had to do fabric, let's see here. This is fabric G, this is fabric C, and this is fabric M. So you have to do one of these for the block. This one is not pressed. So we're gonna go ahead and press that. Get my cords here. This one is fabric A, fabric F, and fabric M. That's where the swatch page that we did is super handy to have. I refer to it constantly because my colors are different. So there's those 2 units. We're going to set those aside. And then the next one is dealing with all bias triangles. Our favorite thing, right? All right. So let's move that out of the way, and then we're going to grab our next pile. So the next block unit looks like this, and we have to make 2, well, we have to make 1 of this and then a mirror image of it, and that is flipping the position for these 2, and I will talk you through it. The first thing you do is you're going to have 6 7/8 inch squares for the big triangle, and these little guys come out of a 7 1/4 inch square. So here's a little math for you. Anytime you need to figure out a half square triangle, you take your finished size, in this case 6 inches, and you add 7/8 to it. So you would cut a 6 7/8 inch square. Anytime you are going to cut the square across both diagonals, you need to cut a 7 1/4 inch square, and then you cut this way. So you're adding finished size is 6 inch, you add 1 1/4 inch to it to get the correct size when you cut it. That takes care of all your diagonals and your seam allowance. So 7/8 for half squares and 1 1/4 inch for quarter squares. Those are 2 numbers, they're never gonna change. I use them all the time when I'm designing. So now we need to cut this guy. This is the 6 7/8. We need to cut it in half diagonally. And this one is point to point. Unfortunately, I don't know any other tricks to it. You do use the 45-degree line on your ruler. Align the edges of the ruler point to point. And you just cut. I'm sure someday I'll figure out a better way to do it, but that works. Now, if this was the 7 1/4 inch one, I would have my Martelli turntable out here, and I would just rotate and repeat to cut to get the 4 half square or the 4 quarter square triangles. So here's one that I've already cut. So this is for that. This is the 7 1/4 that I've already cut. So hope I haven't lost anybody there. So that was cut one diagonal. I rotated on the Martelli turntable, or you just rotate it on your cutting table and cut the second diagonal, and that gets you the 4 quarter square triangles. So then once you have those, we're ready to put our 2 blocks together. This is the 1 block. And so how we start is we lay out these guys. This will match that block. You need one like this, and you need one like this. It is super easy to mess up sewing these. Trust me, I've done it. So what I do is I always lay it out like the picture says, and in this case we're going this way, and I flip this over on top. And again, I like to start at the right angle. So once I have it flipped, this stays together. You can drop a pin in if you want, but it stays together, and I want the right angle. So I just carefully will put it like this. And I will stack these up so that I know, and then before I sew, I flip open the top one and verify that it is the way I want it before I sew like 100 of these. That is always good insurance, is stack them up so you can see they all go the same way, and then flip that top one and make sure that it goes the way you want before you sew everything. So then once we're done with this is all bias, so be very delicate with it. So I go ahead and I stretch this. I go ahead and I sew this. I start at the top, go to the point, and then I press these open. And I press all of them to the green in this case, or fabric B in this case, okay? Another trick that I didn't do because of how I was demoing is you could lay the 7 1/4 cream and green squares together and cut the diagonals, and as long as they're right sides together, they'll just be ready to sew. So that's another trick. So then once we have these, we're ready to press. And again, I press to the green. Everything is stretchy at this point, all of it. Just be really careful with it. Open it up, again, edge of the iron, press to the green. I leave the dog ear until the very end, until I get it back into a square. There's no need to worry about that. All right, now we have that pressed. We take this piece, and you'll see here if I flip this in the right orientation, this is the mirror image of that. We do this piece on here, and we're going to flip this down, and here is my tip on this, because today, of course, because I want to show you something, I actually sewed it perfect. What are the chances? Sometimes these two little triangles will be a little smaller, or they're distorted, or they're, you know, they've been handled, and the bigger guy is one piece of fabric. It's more likely the more accurate fabric. So you could align this on the bigger triangle, and even if you see a little purple here, which I'm forcing, you're okay if everything is aligned, and how you align it is this seam, this sewn seam right here is going, and I'm going to darken it so you can see it in the video. That's my sewn seam. That sewn seam needs to align with the point of the purple triangle. Okay, once that's aligned, then you can center, and you can drop a pin in there. You can center everything else off of that and sew it, okay? So when I go to sew this, in this case, these guys are a little bit bigger than this. I'm going to sew it this way and make sure my 1/4 inch foot follows the purple triangle. Okay, if everything is aligned, you should be able to just flip this over and sew it. And then once you have it sewn, here's a good example. See here, see where that purple is just sticking there? We're fine, it's okay. As long as everything else lines up, we're good. So once you have that sewn, we're ready to press this into a square. And again, you see I'm not going out to this edge or this edge, I'm just getting that seam down. And then you can square it up 6 1/2 and get rid of the dog ears, or you could just clip these with your scissors, however you want to do it. So now we have that, and we need to do the flip and sew here. And that is done the same way we did it before. We just mark our square, aligning all 3 edges, draw your line, and then you align the smaller triangle out right on there. And this is your 1/4 inch foot line. You sew point to point, and you flip it out, and you end up with this. Okay? So that's how you do the first unit and the second unit. Then the last thing is to put your square together. So we have all our units here. So this is I gotta look at what I'm doing here. This is the lower right corner. This is the upper left corner. And then you've got this guy here. We know this guy goes here because this cream background should have its mate right here. And same with this guy, this cream should have its mate right here. Okay, so these line up. One of the beauties of this quilt that makes it as cool as it is that what happens from block to block to block is this background will marry into that background. This background will marry into the same background on the blocks to it, and the same thing with this. Instead of having one background on each block, I created it so it actually transitions throughout the blocks. That's why we're showing all 3 backgrounds in this block. So if you go and look at the picture, you'll see what I'm talking about, and I'm going to pull the camera up here so I can show you what I'm talking about on the board. And if you're doing this during the week and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I monitor all the social media, or you can just email me, whichever is easiest. So here on block 1, you'll see this block right here. I have the purple that then marries into this purple. That breaks, softens and breaks, softens your break line. So if this was a different color, this would be a hard line like here. But because they match, it marries into it. And then out here, when we put the blocks on, the first blocks will marry into this black. But up here where it's green, it's going to touch another green in the block. So it'll come together here in another couple of weeks when we have a few more blocks to look at. But be aware when you're sewing this block together that the cream should flow, and then over here the 2 greens meet with the black. And that will make sense later. So just checking for questions. No questions. All right. So for this week, we're going to make 8 of these if you're doing the actual Dutch Wonderland. Okay? I already did my 8. And then post what you've got, whether you are still back here doing this guy, or if you did your swatch page, whatever your progress is, just post it. That enters you in the drawing for next week. And I think that's everything. Make sure you check out our blog where we have the free block of the month, which is going to be summer themed this week. This month is Buckets of Fun. That's all up and ready for you guys to enjoy. And I hope to see you back here next week when we do week 5. Believe it or not, we'll be halfway through this sew along. And we will be doing block 3. And that one is all half square triangles. So I know we've been covering the ruler technique, and we've been covering the traditional technique for half square triangles. Well, next week I'm going to show you several other ways to make half square triangles from a square, other ways you could cut them to get more accurate half square triangles. So we are going to be covering half square triangles again, but it will be more in depth and a little more, there's some tips there that you can use. So make sure you turn in next week for that. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.